All right, this is the third edition of the For Harriet Roundtable. This is where the For Harriet staff gets together to talk about this week, what we liked, what we didn't like, what worked, what didn't work, and basically, the various little controversies that spring up at the site and across the internet throughout the week. So, hi, guys.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so I am Kim. I'm the founder and editor of For Harriet. So everybody introduce yourself. Let's start with Michelle.
I'm Michelle, and I am a senior editor at For Harriet.
I'm Deanna, and I'm junior editor at For Harriet.
I'm Alexis, and I'm an editorial assistant at For Harriet.
Hey, I'm Janika, and I'm an editorial assistant.
Okay, so like usual, let's start with our favorite pieces of the week. So, who wants to go first? Let's have Michelle go first.
Okay, so I really liked We Are All Survivors, Inequality. Wait, I want to get the title right. How Systematic Inequality Traumatizes Black Women by Marina Bridges. I thought she did an excellent job of not only discussing the ways that like Black women, just in everyday life, people go through traumas, but also because of the intersection of our race and our gender and oftentimes class, we also face other like what she termed big T traumas. And I think, and she also connected it back to mental health and seeking out counseling and seeking out support, which I think is, all of these things are still things that, I don't know if it's like all Black people or all Black women who have an issue, but it's definitely like we're definitely told, oh, you're strong, so you can survive and you can get through. And she did a really good job of saying like, okay, that might be true, but also trauma is a very real thing and it can affect you in very real ways. And we might not be aware of like the way that we face trauma, and we don't always, we're not always allowed to call the issues that we go through trauma. And so I thought that was a really important kind of takeaway. It was just really well written. She talked about like state-sanctioned violence. She talked about sexual assault. She talked about a bunch of other things that I can't think of off the top of my head. But it was just a really, really, really solid piece. And she had a lot of anecdotes as well as like hard examples, because a lot of times people are like, Black, like, that's not real. And it's like, oh, but I came with receipts. So I thought it was a great piece.
Yeah, so I think Michelle mentioned when we were going around picking our favorite pieces that there was a lot of good stuff published this week. So it was really difficult to choose, and I definitely loved that because it really fits perfectly in line with our mission, right, of reiterating the fact that Black women aren't doing all right, right? The narrative around Black women is that we're fine because we are outperforming Black men in a lot of areas, that we don't need attention, that we are, not susceptible to the attacks that we face daily. So that was a really good one. Deanna, what was your favorite?
My favorite piece this week was Black Kids Matter Too. We Must Stop the Public Shaming of Black Youth Online by Ogechi Emechebe. I hope I'm saying that right. I really enjoyed this piece because she talks about the abuse that public shaming, like the emotional abuse that public shaming has on Black youth. And she also ties it to slavery and white supremacy. And something that I loved about this piece is that on the For Harriet Facebook page, it like started a lot of conversation, which is what I always love about pieces on For Harriet. Like, people are always in the comments like responding to each other, and I think that discipline and public shaming is something that needs to be talked about. And one of my favorite parts of the piece is when she says that when we cheer parents on for public shaming, we tell children that there's no space for them that's safe, because out in the world they're not safe, at home they're not safe. Like, okay, so where am I safe? Like, that's not cool. And I really enjoyed that piece because as someone who plans to have kids, I've been thinking about like how I would discipline my children, and I don't think public shaming will be one. But yeah, that was my favorite piece.
Yeah, so that was actually my favorite piece too because, um, like you does all parenting pieces generate a lot of buzz, I think, because there is this idea that what happens inside of the home is only the business of the people inside of that home. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that, right? Because I do believe in community and that we are all responsible to each other. So people get very indignant when you question people's parenting choices. But I am very against public shaming. I am also against spanking, which is controversial. And so I really appreciated that viewpoint. Let's go with Alexis next.
Okay, so my favorite piece was the issue with perceived whiteness of being an alternative black girl. And I just really thought this was a great piece because a lot of people don't get that blackness is not a monolith and that black girls can have so many different aesthetics and still be beautiful. And I think that's something we really try to embrace on For Harriet, whether it's showing black girls looking beautiful at Afro-punk or black girls rocking all kinds of colors in their hair or black girls in every size of bikinis. And so I think this really enforces the need to continue showcasing all these types of black beauty. And it also pointed out to me how thinness and able-bodied privilege and light-skin privilege have allowed certain women to be praised for occupying this alternative space while also erasing women who don't fit into these categories. So I thought that part was really eye-opening for me, and so I really enjoyed reading that piece.
Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite piece from this week as well. It was something I've actually struggled with, these things that are deemed whiteness, the alternative aesthetic, and it's assumed to be white, but how do I fit into that scene? And I really enjoyed it. It was super well written, and actually it made me think of a conversation I was having with my mom. I was telling her I wanted to dye my hair gray, silver, because it's like the pastel trend, it's super in, and she was like, that's for white girls, and that like it fits exactly into the piece, this idea that the alternative look is only for white women, and where do black alternative girls fit in? So I really enjoyed reading that.
Yeah, so that was by far the most popular piece this week, and I will say I didn't see it coming. Didn't see it coming. So I say this every week, and it's just so interesting to me, and this is like why this job is so fun, because sometimes like they're hot button topics, but I had no idea that that piece was going to go so far. Like one of the most popular pieces we've past couple of months, honestly. And so I'm interested in your thoughts on why it was so well received.
Saw you.
I think it's partially because a lot of black women are trying to figure out how they fit into this space, and like having this article published on For Harriet like kind of opened up a space for them to have a conversation about it. Like there's so many women in the public space right now, like occupying spaces that they're not supposed to fit in, and I think like that may be why. I'm not sure. You all can add. Those are my initial thoughts.
I know we did a piece earlier in the week that was called Alternative Girls Need Representation Too, and that one also did really well. And I think it kind of like was almost like a testing of the waters, because like, how are people going to receive this piece? And then they received that one well. And then I think Enda Loren, the writer of The Perceived Whiteness of Being an Alternative Black Girl, she just outlined like what it's like to be an alternative black girl, and as someone who like grew up listening to like The Used and Fall Out Boy and was like deemed like whitewashed because of that, I really connected to what she had to say. And I think a lot of times that personal storytelling, in addition to the critique and the analysis, is also really helpful, and she was able to connect it to a bunch of different things. So it wasn't just an alternative black girl who's into punk, but also alternative Black girls who are not necessarily punk, but who are into Afro-punk, but also alternative Black girls who are into goth. And she also described the way that certain celebrities have, presented an alternative look, but depending on who you ask or who they were viewed by, they were viewed as trying to embrace whiteness, or even sometimes I think it's interesting, like they'll also be called like ghetto. So it's this weird thing of like when you're an alternative Black girl, if you identify that way, of like how people read you because of how people are taught to read race and how people are taught to read Black women in general, and it's like we're supposed to fit into this very narrow box. And just as you get older, you realize, number one, that is never you, so it can't be any other Black woman as well. Like we're just like Black women be complex. We got layers and layers of existence, yo. Like I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, I just kind of want to add to that piece about you saying
Any
that
other
like some
thoughts?
people are perceived ghetto. Like I think that also ties into like what Alexis was saying about like light skin privilege and stuff. Like if I'm dark skinned and I have these orange braids, I'm perceived ghetto, but if I'm light skinned, I might be read differently. So I think that, yeah, that definitely added to why the piece was successful.
Yeah, there were so many layers to it. So going back to the colorism aspect of it, she mentioned like how Lil' Kim and Nicki Minaj, they are read as more like when Nicki was rocking the pink wig, it was like, oh, that's ghetto. But with other, I think of other alternative Black girls, she mentioned like FKA Twigs and Jada Pinkett Smith, who have that alternative, or in the alternative scene, they're read differently than like Lil' Kim and Nicki Minaj. So there was so many layers to it, which I really loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's just something that every Black girl can relate to, because every Black girl has her quirks and has these things about her that people will label as white. So I think I just saw it and I clicked on it because I was like, I can relate to this, so I definitely want to read it.
Yeah, so this is the thing, right? Okay, so I have other people to read things and to spot things, because honestly, I don't relate to that, right? So I can definitely relate to people, projecting, whiteness onto me, right? In a you talk white, or the traditional like acting white sort of thing, but I don't consider myself to be an alternative Black girl, and so that wouldn't even cross my consciousness. In fact, there's a lot of pushback or I saw about the piece, was really big. So when something circulates like that, of course there's going to be pushback like, why are you labeling yourself, right? Or you're not special because you listen to Fall Out Boy. Or, like all of, the sorts of pushback that you get when, you try to, I think when people say that they're blurs, they get that pushback. I think when people say that they're alternative Black girls, they get that pushback. And so, I don't know, did you guys see any of that, or how do you interpret that?
I think it's like that special, like when I went to college, they would always call us like special snowflakes. Not necessarily me, but like the idea of like if you thought that you were somehow different, you were termed a special snowflake. And it's not that people who identify as being alternative think that they're special snowflakes. It's just a lot of times like their appearance is very different, and so they do come across as alternative. And I think it's hard because a lot of times I think people read, if someone says that the alternative, that they're trying to distance, again, and the piece explains that, of like trying to distance themselves from Blackness, or saying that they're exceptional in their Blackness, and that's not what it is. I think it's just, we do have these kind of dominant ideas about what Blackness is, and not that necessarily all of those dominant ideas are necessarily stereotypes, but like even I have certain things that I think, oh, if you really Black, you do this, or this, and that's just like it's a cultural thing. It's a way that we recognize each other, and I think sometimes people read, oh well, if you listen to rock music, that means you're not listening to hip-hop music, and hip-hop music is our people, so you need to check yourself. And I don't think that's always what people are saying, but that might be what people are hearing.
Word to all of that.
Yeah, and I'm really glad and appreciative that we could really deeply explore this and work through it, because Enda made points there that I had never considered, because I think I am somebody who kind of writes it off, like, so, like, things that I had never considered, and really sparked a huge conversation. But moving on, so for Harriet has an agenda, right? So, like, we are not a neutral space. So we talk about progressive topics, progressive ideas. We are inclusive, right, of trans people, of LGBT people more broadly. We don't promote, like the misogynistic, like Tyrese, Steve Harvey brand of advice, right? Like, this is a very, like, progressive women's space, and I purposely did not label it a feminist space, but honestly, like, I'm a feminist, so that is going to permeate the content that we create and the way that we approach certain topics, right? So, anyways, I put that preface to ask you guys, what do you think it means for us to be an explicitly progressive Black women's space, in a way that, honestly, like, I don't think that there are any other spaces online for Black women that are as explicitly feminist/womanist as For Harriet is. What does that mean, and what is our responsibility?
I think part of that means, like, having stories told from all different types of Black women. So, like, this story that we just talked about alternative Black girls, yeah. Like, it means including those stories. It means being open, like, our readership being open to, like, hearing about different types of stories, and knowing that when you say something, like, against Black women, that we're going to clap back. I think that's what it means.
I think it also means just examining our content and the things that we're putting out there to make sure that it does include all different types of Black girls and Black women, just making sure of that constantly.
I think for me, like, this week especially, you said responsibility, and, like, that is something I was grappling with, because, we did have a lot of transphobia on the site this week. We did have, I feel like the transphobia is, like, the main thing. And then also, like, we've had random messages like, why do you hate Black men? And I'm learning, like, what that responsibility is, because on one hand, it is a responsibility to, like, for us, even though, like, sometimes the comments are overwhelming, to, like, go in and check people and remove people if we have to make sure that it's a safe space for the people that we're trying to be inclusive for and inclusive of. But it also, that responsibility is, like, we have to sometimes let other Black women know who we are trying to ride for, but who might not necessarily be getting our message, or, like, understand, like, what For Harriet really is. Like, hey, you are welcome to have your own opinion that is different from the one that is, like, what we feel on the editorial board, but just know, like, we will check you. Like, we are inclusive of Black women, and we do want to celebrate Black women, but that doesn't mean that it's okay to, like, I'm not going to articulate this the way I want to, but, like, it's not okay for us to hate on other Black women, but I don't know how to exactly say it, but, like, it is a double-edged responsibility.
Right. So one of the things that came up this week, of course, when we're talking about trans women and Caitlyn Jenner in particular, right, is a sentiment that comes up a lot is, why would Black women exert energy to defend a white Republican, right, trans person? Okay, well, because as a Black woman, right, I can acknowledge that I have privileges, right? I can acknowledge that I can also um, participate in the oppression of other people. And I, because I believe in justice, because I want liberation for everybody, feel a responsibility to make sure that I am doing my part to change the culture, to change the conversation, to make sure that every single person, whether they are a white Republican trans woman, whether they are a Black trans woman, a Black gay woman, that they can live freely and safely. Right. I feel I have a responsibility because I believe in liberation. Like, that's the goal. And so I don't really care about any pushback that we get about writing for trans people. And usually when we are using a non-Black person like Caitlyn Jenner, right, to make a point, a larger point about transphobia, right, we always circle back to how it affects Black people, right? So how it affects specifically Black trans women, right? So we use that the one person who is making headlines to dial down, right, to drill into how this oppression affects the people that we interact with. That we are going to be in closest proximity to, who look like us. So I get often that for Harriet's agenda is not representative enough of the Black woman's experience, right? Which, okay, whatever. Like, we are all Black women, but ultimately the agenda for Harriet is liberation. It's freedom, right? And like, Black women cannot be free if we are participating in the subjugation or the oppression or the marginalization of anybody. Like, that's it. And that is really where I stand on that. Anyways, any other thoughts?
Well said. That was so great.
Any other thoughts on what it means for us to be an explicitly progressive space that focuses on intersectionality among Black women?
I also think it means like not shaming people for the work that they do. Like, in your interview with what is her name,
Her
Dr.
name is Marae Miller Young.
Yes, in your interview with her, there was a lot of like people shaming like Black women in porn, and like some of these women, that's what they want to do with their lives. So like there shouldn't be like any people shaming them for that. Of course, there are some bad things that happen in the porn industry, but it's like, I don't know, it was like reading the comments on that post was really disheartening to me.
Did anybody else see that?
Yeah, I read through some of the comments, and I think a lot of times people conflate like porn. So like porn is part of sex work, and then people conflate sex work and human trafficking. And it's not to say that there aren't women who are in porn who haven't been abused, or like they're like, the porn industry does have its issues, and it does can be very sexist and very misogynistic, but there's also a lot of people trying to create alternatives to that. That is sex positive porn, that is feminist porn, and also like just to be very frank and very blunt and potty mouth, like Black women have the right to fuck however they want to fuck. Like, you can't police you can't police that. A Black woman in all of her agency and all of her ability to consent says, this is what I want to do with my life, this is what I want to do with my body. I'm fully aware of what it means. It's not for someone else to tell her, oh, well, you're oppressed, or oh, well, you're bringing the race down, and stuff like that. Like, we have to be a little bit more nuanced when we read certain things, and like just because one issue exists doesn't mean that that's an issue for everybody. So yeah, a lot of those comments were, and I mean, that's real, that's how people feel, but like also, like, I think For Harriet is also really good at educating. I learn a lot from For Harriet. I've learned a lot working during my time working with For Harriet, and so I think also people have to like be open to that education.
I think that people put forth kind of a bad faith argument or bad faith arguments when it comes to any piece that deals with sexuality and liberating Black women's sexuality or understanding, the nuances, as Michelle said, of Black women's sexuality. And when it comes to the porn piece, I think the argument that people were putting forth in bad faith was this puts Black women at risk argument, right? Or it was you are supporting human trafficking argument. When honestly, really, these people don't care about Black women human trafficking. Like, I'm gonna be like, honestly, I think the people who are really, really doing the pushback against us having a discussion about porn and about the way that Black women performers and directors in porn are exerting agency in these positions that they're in, it has nothing to do with the human trafficking. Like, I truly don't believe that. I truly believe that people are just they are against Black women exerting control over their bodies, exerting control over their sexualities, and being unashamed of that. And so we, try to suppress that or deny that by going, oh, but what about the poor women who are being trafficked? Like, yeah, but if you are only talking about human trafficking when we are talking about Black women being pleasured, like, if that's the only time you're talking about it, then you're not really down. Like, that's not really what you're about, So anyways, I honestly was surprised. I didn't think that it was going to be that negative. I didn't think the response was going to be that negative, but it really was. Whatever, it is what it is. Any other thoughts about sex work and Black women, sexuality, being a progressive space?
It all ties in together. So when we say that for Harriet is for Black women, you can't ignore these specific identities. You can't ignore the Black women who are sex workers. You can't ignore the Black women working in porn. You can't pick and choose, So it all comes together, and being a progressive space, we need to acknowledge and uplift Black women of all identities.
Yeah. And I don't want to, okay. So, as I always say, I do have a very specific viewpoint. I think generally the staff is very progressive and liberal, and I don't want to be closed-minded, right? So I always have to check myself when people push back or bring up these arguments. I really genuinely try to consider it fairly, but sometimes. And we'll stop there. I try to consider it fairly. I do. Because I don't want to be so stuck in my view that I can't see if somebody is bringing up a really fair point. And I did actually, there's this documentary on Netflix called Hot Girls Wanted, which is like, Rashida Jones is one of the producers. She's been making the rounds, and it's basically about women in porn. They're all white, so... But I did actually go back and watch that documentary because I was really interested in if I was really glorifying something that genuinely is putting women at risk. Anyways, it was a good, interesting documentary. I don't think that changes Murray's work, but anyways, I try to be fair. All right, so we've already gone over what did the best this week. Was there anything that we wish we could have covered? For Harriet produces a lot of content. I say this all the time, but it is actually remarkable, you guys. Like, I feel like we should all be very proud of ourselves and the work that we do because we are actually killing the game right now. It's crazy. So, but was there anything, like any essay that you wish would have been written, anything that we missed this week?
I feel like we were really, really on it this week.
Honestly, yeah. I don't listen. I don't. Listen, there's always room for improvement. We're definitely growing, but we actually killed the game this week. Like it was actually remarkable. What we didn't talk about here, which we could talk about really briefly, of course, was McKinney. So let's, wrap it up in talking about McKinney a little bit. So on Sunday, the video went viral of the 15-year-old girl being slammed to the ground by former McKinney police officer Eric Casebolt. And this is one of those times, that was one of those times when it's really interesting to work on the internet because it was Sunday and things kind of slowed down on Sunday. We don't post as much on Sunday. People aren't really working and attached to their computers, but we still have to respond and get the piece up and, start doing the commentary and start doing the unpacking of that. I am interested in y'all's first reactions to the video, though.
When I first saw the video, I was a little numb to it. I was in shock, just watching it, and I didn't even really know how to respond. It's just I'm tired of seeing Black women get abused, and it was just another one of those things. I'm trying not to be that person who gets numb to all these videos that surface on the internet, but that was how I was feeling at the beginning.
Same. And it's really hard to fight that numbness sort of, but I was out of town, and so I had limited access, but I had time to check Twitter, and there was the hashtag, and I was like, what is happening? And I click on it, and just watching the video and then seeing it, it's just that exhaustion. It's okay, oh my gosh, something else has happened again, and it's just, yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah, when I first clicked on the link, I thought I would be numb to it, but when I saw that cop just on top of that girl, it just was I just couldn't take it. It was too much.
I always have a delayed response to things, and I don't know if it's the numbness aspect of it or if it's just because I'm a slow-ass processor. But I saw the video, and I think it was hard because at first it starts off with Casebolt doing that barrel roll, and so that, I'm sorry,
it's hilarious.
What was that?
It was so ridiculous. And so, I think that kind of took me out of it, and then then I realized what was happening, and I don't think I watched the whole thing the first time I watched it. I think I watched halfway through, and I was like, I can't watch this angry white man yell at all these children. And then once it started trending more, I think I went back and watched it, and then saw him when he literally grabbed that girl. People are no, he threw her to the ground, pushed her face into the dirt, and then got on top of her and kneeled on her back. And that was ooh, but I think that is when the rage started, and that's when the anger started. And you mentioned what we didn't cover, and just real quick, I want to talk about Khalif Browder, and just those two stories start circulating at the same time, and so this has been a lot of me trying to navigate those feelings this week of not wanting to be mad at white people because not all white people are bad, but also now it's young lives that are being taken. It's young people who are being affected by this brutality, by this inequality, by this racism, and it's hurtful. It just deep down inside it hurts.
So I actually made the decision to post the little video of 15-year-old Jeria Becton is her name, being thrown to the ground, and I feel conflicted about whether or not it's appropriate to share video of Black bodies being violated, right? So I chose to share it because this is one of the few times where we see video of Black women experiencing police brutality, or she's a Black girl, sorry, she's 15. And I really wanted people to see, because the narrative is about Black boys, that this happens to girls too, but I actually completely understand why people find that offensive. I completely get it. So anyways, I'm interested in your thoughts on sharing videos of police brutality, whether it is a genuine help or whether it just perpetuates the desensitization to that violence.
I will say it can be traumatic. Going back to the conversation we had earlier, watching videos and having that secondhand trauma almost. But I don't know. I can't say that it's not important to share this and make people understand that this is a very important issue. And would it have even been solved if the video didn't go viral? Like, we don't know. So.
Yeah, I think that. Sorry.
I was going to say, other thoughts on that?
I think that I agree with what Jonica just said. I think it's important to share it, because in order for us to like get justice and like move toward Black girls being talked about and being centered, people have to know about it. And yeah, I think it's important to share, even though we might be traumatized after watching it.
Yeah. So anyways, I did decide I live in Oklahoma City, so I drove down to McKinney for church, and that was interesting. That's all I have to say about that. And I am glad that I was able to go. But yeah, it was interesting. I'm not gonna say bad things about the march, sorry, but that's all I got. Okay, so I am really glad. This was a really good week out for Harriet. I think we covered a lot of things. We did it really well. I think on the business side we did really good. And I think that we all really should be proud of ourselves. And I'm so thankful that I had the good sense to pick a team who gets it. I'm glad that you guys understand our mission, that you get what we're trying to do, that you do it. The voices that you insert into your pieces, into your work, is exactly, I think, this space needs. So thank you guys. You did so well. We did so good this week, honestly. I think it's been about a month that you guys have been on board, and by far, best week ever. So we're moving into a new week. Is there anything that you would like to see, like special features or projects that you'd like us to tackle?
I think you mentioned this before, but Orange is the New Black. I guess just maybe someone's opinion on what the new season gets right and what they don't get right.
Who's going to binge watch? Or, I mean,
That's what I was going to say.
Y'all plan on doing that?
Oh, okay. but I would like an expert's opinion.
Okay, right. Like, millennials, don't have to get out. You don't have to, interact with people. It's fine. All right. Yeah, I definitely think so. My hope for this season of Orange is the New Black is that we have, honestly, less white people. Honestly, white people are the least interesting part of Orange is the New Black. So I just need less Piper, 30% less Piper, and, more tasty. Okay. And the other stuff that I don't want to talk about on air. So I think I'm going to wrap it up? This is great. This is the third edition of the For Harriet Roundtable, where we talk about what goes on behind the scenes at For Harriet. I think we are the only explicitly progressive Black women space, and I'm really proud of that. I'm also proud of the fact that we do pretty well. And we do genuinely good work that I think is changing the narrative in very tangible ways. So I'm very proud of that. I'm really proud of you guys. You've done a really good job this week. So I'm going to sign off. I'm Kim.
I'm Michelle.
Deanna.
Alexis.
Janika.
And that's it, you guys. We'll see y'all next week. Actually, I might be out of town next week, but we'll try. All right.